The movie was originally titled Gundown, which I thought was a great title for the movie. Bruce comes bounding up and he says, how about we call it Welcome to Jericho, which is the name of the town. And inwardly, Arthur Sarkisian and Walter Hill and I are going, Jesus. None of us had enough guts to tell the star of the movie. This was terrible title.
Today at A Word on Westerns, we are continuing our discussion and chats with bad guys. We have somebody today who worked with Steven Seagal and Jean-Claude Van Damme and Bruce Willis, and he's meaner than any of them. His name is Patrick Kilpatrick. Patrick He's the only Well, just before we get going, I want this image we have right here. I'm going to hold it up, I guess, for Brett. This is you, and my guess is this is from the Louisville War, the Quick of the Dead.
Which I think is in. I'm prepared to be disavowed of this person. I actually think I'm the last Caucasian actor to be allowed to play in it. Because the Native American Alliance and those groups, it's hard to get away with it. And in fact, they tried to get me fired the whole time.
I see you had hair back
auditioned then. About 1,000 actors.
You had hair back then.
No, that's a headband. It's easy to do. It's a wig. I had hair, but I didn't have anything like that. I brought this picture because I wanted to talk about Trigger. That's probably the finest Western horse I ever had. A lot of times they don't get the credit they deserve. He's a big, strong, powerful horse. And, the people don't realize they're very bright. So they know all the words. In those days before digital, they'd say, rolling to get the audio going, and then speed when the audio was up to the camera speed. And then the horses knew exactly what to do. They'd show them where the mark is. They'd go right to the mark, and then they'd turn and go right back to the trailer.
I've known actors who couldn't do that.
Exactly. They get really annoyed if you had to do an extra take because they wanted to get back to the feedback. So you'd have to wrestle them back to the initial mark. But, the horses have all been so unique and so... I did Crossfire Trail with Tom Selleck. And he had a horse that would wait till they said rolling. And then just before they'd say action, he'd splay out his legs and urinate. And spoil the shot. So he was totally unique.
Well, with Trigger, I know the trainer that Roy had, they poked Trigger before the scene started, and Trigger would go to the bathroom knowing that the camera was getting ready to him. So Trigger was the smartest horse in the movie.
I wish that worked with me. Somebody could poke me and then urinate. Another horse worth mentioning that was on Last Stand at Sabre River with Tom Selleck. There was a horse called Twister. And Twister was an aerial expert. He, back in the day, they sometimes would tie up horses so that they'd fall or whatever. But Twister didn't need that. He'd done about 250 high falls. And Selleck had to ride on and then get shot by an ambush. And the horse would go up and catch air, turn almost sideways, and then come down and land in a crease off in place by the crew. So I thought he was incredibly remarkable.
Wow. And you rode that horse?
No, that was Tom's horse. He was only used for when they needed aerial work when a cowboy got shot or something like that.
There was a stuntman who has passed, but worked all the time in the late 40s, 50s, 60s, even into the 70s, Jack Williams.
Okay.
And Jack had a trick horse that would rear up like this and then fall down looking like it was crushing him.
Yeah.
And so Jack would be hired for the day. All these other stuntmen working the whole time. Jack would come in dressed as an Indian or whatever.
Right.
And he'd get shot the horse and pull up, bam, he's down. And if you see all these Westerns from the 50s and 60s, that's Jack Williams. And he's picking up a big paycheck most of the time.
Yeah, it's tremendous when they have these
smart trick horse.
Fantastic stuff. I had a horse for Crossfire Trail that very unique. I actually was lucky. I was going to tell the story about Jerry Potter replacing somebody. You know, I teach actors sometimes, and you always try to get their skill set up prior to the job. The universe will allow them a place to put that skill set, but they need to do it. And my parents always looked at, although it was English, looked at riding as an upwardly mobile activity in New England. So I was really lucky to get my first horse when I was 9. So when I got these Westerns, you know, I could ride.
Did you ride English growing up then?
I did. I was a competitive or recreational rider for that. And
Dressage,
pony
jumping,
club.
hunting, jumping.
Well, it was like steep. I loved speed. I was,
You look like you would love speed.
well, I wasn't that good at the nuances of style like dressage. My sisters were great at that. Put me on a horse, and my father would get these retired racehorses. There are only 3 or 4, and then we train them as hunters. But the prep of English riding is really, I think, brilliant for Western riding, and so I loved it. I mean, last end at Sabre River, I think our first act, the very first day, was herding a herd of 80 wild horses. So you're out there in Santa Fe, and it's beautiful, and doing that, and fortunately I could ride real well.
You know, in the Crossfire Trail, one of the great Western directors, Simon Windsor, who did Lonesome Dove, he's really
Man from Snowy River.
right. Had new horses and knew where to put the camera, and he tells stories about how difficult it is, for the wild roundups with the horses.
No, not for me. It was really fun. Again, I mean, I'm not bragging. I could ride like a demon because I'd had them since I was 9 years old. So I was reared on that, and so I was very lucky to have done that because it paid off big in those Western. I did spear my back on that job, and then from the riding, which was interesting because I wasn't able to sleep for about 3 days. So I eventually went to a doctor, and the guy says, I said, look, I got lines to learn. I can't really take anything that will diminish my mental capacity. So he goes, I have just the thing for you, Halcyon. Which at the time, Halcyon was breaking into the news because people were murdering people on Halcyon. Fortunately, I had the next day off because I was like a slobbering drunk for the whole, until about 3 or 4 of the next day. When I had that long, I was able to get my rhythm and sleep back in. Great jobs.
Well, with Sam on the Louis L'Amour's Quick and the Dead, was Sam involved in casting you as well?
No, it's interesting. I was thinking about that audition a little bit today. I went to the audition, and if you're busy and you're getting a couple auditions a day, I think I had something that had me in a suit to prevent that day. So I actually went out into the flower bed at Paramount or wherever we were auditioning and rolled around in the dirt in the flower bed. Sort of went in covered with dirt. I think they said, well, if this guy's willing to roll around that dirt, I'm in.
A pioneer family pursued by a gang of killers.
These men want our blood!
Their only hope lies in the guts and the guns of a stranger.
Sam, he would do his job, and then he would have a beer, retire to a rock above Flagstaff or wherever Stone and where we were. I remember one time in those days, I actually needed validation for some time. And I was asking Simon, why am I doing this? And I hear this voice going, just do the thing. So something like that. And he's like voice of God for the thing. And of course he was right. Just do it, and he was a very nice, quiet guy.
What is it about Westerns that makes them so appealing? So people are passionate about
Well, I think it's similar to war movies because you're getting to do all of the wonderful things that you can do without the deprivation and the starvation and the actual killing of death. So, and we all come, at least males, they come from cowboys and Indians and war films, and so you get to play with all the weaponry and you get to do the horses and all of that stuff. And again, without the deprivation there and the reality. I've been very lucky to do that rather than actually fight in wars or ride a wagon across the country, which are ancestors.
One of a great Western was that Clint Eastwood did with Sergio Leone, Fistful of Dollars, was based on Yojimbo. Now, Yojimbo was taken by Walter Hill, and
For Last Man Standing.
Last Man Standing that you were in with Bruce Willis.
Which is a Western, even though it takes place.
Sure, every film Walter does is a Western. and they shot it out at Melody Ranch.
Yeah.
So what's...
They call it First Man Falling and Last Man Standing.
What type of director is Walter?
He's a great guy. I probably pride myself in. I never got a lot of direction because I would work really hard to be so prepared by the time I got there. The only direction I had, I was playing an Irish American, and as is typical in things when you're doing a dialect, he'd say, let's just lighten it, for cinema and television audiences. I mean, if you actually spoke like a Texas person or a real Irish person, you'd need subtitles. So the only thing he said was just lighten it up a little and he'd get some scene. So, but really fun. He's a real man's man. But he had a funny incident about that, which says, the movie was originally titled Gun Down, which I thought was a great title for the movie. Well, we're sitting there, and I'm sitting there with Arthur Sarkisian, the producer, and Walter Hill. I was a young actor, and so Bruce comes bounding up with extraordinary exuberance, which of course I loved working with him because he was a real actor, and unlike some of the martial arts guys who were making that transition, were interesting guys, but it was great to work with somebody from New York. He had been an actor and stuff. And he comes bounding up and he says, how about we call it Welcome to Jericho, which was the name of the town. And inwardly, Arthur Sarkisian and Walter Hill and I are going, Jesus. But none of us had enough guts to tell the star of the movie. This was a terrible title. So Welcome to Jericho it became. And then one day, Bill Paxton came in. He was a very courageous guy. And he went, Walter, what the hell is with this Welcome to Jericho? And that was the end of that. So I'm sure you can fuck that out. The bottom line is, it took one guy with courage, to get rid of a bad title.
Well, Gun Down is a good title.
I thought it was great because it's exactly what it is. Last Man Standing has been, you talked about titles. You can't
Now it's a sitcom.
Yeah.
On Melody Ranch, which has been used for so many Westerns over the years, what was it like shooting there?
Very real. I mean, it's a very real set. And, those things help your performance because it's very easy to click in and out when you've got something like that. It's a great space. I recommend anybody visit it if they're in.
I was coming through Texas on my way to Mexico. I needed some time to hide out. I should have known better. Didn't take too long before it started.
You mentioned you teach acting also. What do you tell people who say, I've been cast in this role and I'm supposed to be the meanest son of a bitch there is? How do I do that? How do I become a bad guy?
There are a lot of ways. The central thing is the subtext. Young actors, particularly young actors, often are nice people so that they don't have, their imaginations aren't as perverted and as demented as some of us that have gone along.
The veterans?
Right. So what happens is they'll make a very general subjects for your audience. Subtext is what's actually being said or felt underneath the the words. And you can make up 1,000 choices up there, but you always want to make up one that is graphic and rich. For villains, that's often psychosexual. It's often really, really bad. But that's the great thing about the imagination and our abilities to think widely. And they need to learn how to be more rich and essentially entertaining. When I do a bad guy, they're not unaware of what other people are doing for bad guys in other films and television shows. And so you're aware of the cinematic television world, and you want to pick up the artistic flag and maybe take it a little further. I like to think if you can actually arouse people and make them like you and maybe be drawn to you at the same time you're doing all of this. So a lot of that has to do with being fun, having fun while you're doing.
Bruce Dern, who I know you've worked with, was you'd see him smiling maniacally, gleefully, as he was being a real son of a bitch.
Oh, well, and that's the central thing. Cinema bad guys are having a good time. Generally, you're manipulating people and doing all that. It can get a little weary. And then the one time I did a play, when you're responsible for everything bad that goes on in the entire environment you're in for weeks, months, that can become psychically wearing. So, it sounds really strange, but you kind of have to go off and have a good cry and cleanse that stuff out of your system. But mostly it's fun playing bad guys, except that they give much more money to the fun guys.
Well, when you were younger and growing up and watching films, as a novice, were there actors that you saw that were villains and you particularly liked what they were doing?
I never really calculated becoming an actor. I became a writer and a journalist first and did that for many years and kind of wrote my way into acting. But I've written scripts since. I always put these lines in there someplace. But I think Richard Boone in Hombre is probably one of the greatest, and he's a good he goes, mister, you got some hard bark on you coming down here like that. Yeah. He goes, I wonder what hell's going to look like. Yeah. And Paul Newman, of course, says, we all got to die sometime, just a matter of when. Yeah. It's just a fantastic Western, an essential movie. And
Elmore Leonard, too.
Yeah, which I had the privilege of doing last stand at the River. But, his writing, just that kind of dialogue is it tells you everything about the people. And Richard Boone was just an extraordinary, and we have some great Alan Rickman who just passed away. There's a guy who you always were in love with him, even though he was venal and mild, but he was sensual at the same time, and just completely disregarding all laws of God and man while he's doing the stuff. So, it's great when you have people out. Rutger Hauer is a wonderful villain. And unfortunately, these guys are extraordinary actors, and a lot of times, for some reason, if you do a great job as a villain, Hollywood always puts you in that. Rutger Hauer, I think, has never recovered. He started out as a leading man, or a local leading man. After doing The Hitcher, he became a villain.
Well, you very versatile in what you're doing. I mean, it's your look is so intense, but hearing you talk, there's humor, but it can fit in many different types.
Well, again, to young actors, that's the key to working, is being versatile. I get them going on dialects as rapidly as possible. The more things you can do, the more useful you are to the biz. And so you're going to get called on to continue to,
Well, we loved having you here with us today, and
I bless you.
Thanks.